Welcome to the Seriously Social podcast with your host, Simone Douglas. Our guest today is mindfulness teacher Amanda Goodfellow from Agile Mind. She chats with Simone about mindfulness, misconceptions about meditation, and how social media can affect our mental health.
So welcome to today's Seriously Social podcast. Today I am joined by the fabulous Amanda Goodfellow from Agile Mind. Amanda, thanks for coming along.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Can you just give us and the audience a brief overview about who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm an Adelaide girl, born and raised in Adelaide. Working now as a meditation and mindfulness teacher, mostly in the corporate space, so teaching people, giving them the tools to manage their own mental and emotional health, and also working a little bit in aged care as well, teaching older people how to be mindful.
Yeah, cool. It's an interesting concept, I suppose, teaching older people to be mindful, because as we get older and older, what I tend to find is there's two types of people. There are the people who kind of actively engage in expanding their life and their opportunities and doing things, and then there are the ones that kind of default into a constriction of options and their life in general. How can mindfulness allow us to avoid that constriction or help us to do that?
It's really interesting, and what I've found happens most often is that there's been a change in their life, so they've lost the mobility, or perhaps they used to be really active or had some activities that they used to participate in, and for whatever reason, usually health or an injury, they can't do that anymore. So they're kind of stuck at home, they become lonely, they become socially isolated, and then there's sort of this downward spiral. Where mindfulness and meditation come in is that it's helping us to be more at peace with those feelings of those sort of more uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah.
As human beings, we tend to just want to avoid anything that feels uncomfortable or painful and pursue everything that feels nice.
Good. Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of just how we're put together. So meditation can help us understand, firstly, that that's not reality, because there's both. Yeah. There's always both. And that we can sit with the uncomfortable stuff, and it's okay.
Do you think that there's a challenge currently with, that instant gratification society that we have, but also this story of when I have X, Y, and Z, I'll be happy. If I do A, B, and C, I'll be happy. I kind of think happy is a bit of a dirty word.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a trap, particularly for Western culture. I think we're always not enough.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, there's always something to be learned or gained or had. And so it's really a relearning of knowing that we are enough in this moment, and not attaching a judgment to that, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise, or I want this or I don't want this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you that the word happiness, I guess, has an implication that it's something to aspire to, and it's something that we all want to have, but it's actually not reality. Yeah. Life has everything. It's not just happiness.
Well, it does, and I think, I'm a big believer in cultivating those small moments of joy, whatever that looks like. It might be, joy that I got to drink my morning coffee in silence, or that the sun was hitting the window a certain way, or, someone was pleasant to you in an email. But I think joy or gratitude or whatever you want to call it, I think if you're cultivating that mindfully and very aware of how you create that for other people too, you have a much happier existence in terms of what you're doing in life.
Spot on. Yeah, absolutely. And what I suppose I found interesting when I started to learn and become interested in it is that we're not taught any of this. It's sort of, we're all having to figure this out for ourselves, which I feel was a fairly important piece of information I would have liked to have had as a younger person.
Yeah.
And I definitely think it's a cultural thing. I think in Eastern cultures they're much more in tune with this. We're a lot more outwardly focused.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of learning to cultivate that for ourselves can feel a bit strange.
It can, yeah.
Doesn't happen fast enough. Not good at it straight away, so we can sometimes, give it away. I don't know how many people have said to me, I can't meditate.
Yeah.
It's boring.
Well, I think too, like there's, and I don't know, because I'm very good at active meditation, so I'm passive, like sit, lay still meditation is uncomfortable for me, so I should probably practice more. But if I'm doing active meditation where I'm in a physical activity, like even if it's like the gardening or it's, like running or then it's much easier for me to let all the other things fall away. Is there like a myth or a perception around meditation that you always do it seated with your legs crossed? And
oh my goodness, like so huge. I think it's a really big barrier for a lot of people. And some of the comments that I get, do I have to wear my robes, and will we be chanting? And I generally say, well, we can if you like, because I quite like that kind of stuff. But mindfulness in particular is about just bringing your attention to the present moment. And so definitely that can be when you're running or eating or writing an email. It's just bringing your awareness
to what
with
you're
you.
doing.
Yeah. Which most of the time we're not. We're in what's for dinner or who's picking up the kids. And I think a really good illustration of that is the driving home, and you get home and go, oh my God, I don't remember the journey. I'm not sure what happened then, but I wasn't there. Your mind is somewhere else.
Yeah, you're definitely on automatic pilot on the way through. What are the benefits of cultivating a mindful life?
Oh, well, I'm going to butcher this phrase, but there is a saying that goes something along the lines of an unattentive mind is an unhappy mind. So when our mind and our thoughts are scattered, we're generally less happy. Yeah. So bringing mindfulness to every moment, good or bad, and just being able to sit with that generally will increase our levels of peace, happiness, contentment. Compassion is another word that's, people are kind of growing in comfort with, I think, because that's also a big part of it, is feeling compassion for ourselves and therefore others. Creates a more happy and peaceful life as well.
Yeah, I often get asked, how I manage to do all of the things that I do and still seem to be relatively well adjusted and content in my life. Often not as well structured, the questions that I get. It's like, oh my God, how do you do all the things? I accidentally, well, it wasn't by accident, but I wasn't aware that that's what I was doing at the time. But I have a very carefully constructed happy bubble, which is, like my entire routine in the morning is mindful, doing all the things. So I will literally, the alarm will go off at 5:30 and I'll get up and I'll turn on the sauna, which I've got myself, and it's like amazing. And so, that when that is ready, like I will get in the sauna, I will watch certain types of YouTube videos that are designed to set me up for success and get me into a good state of mind where I can be emotionally available to the people around me. And then, I'll walk out. I don't go anywhere near my children until I've had the sauna in the morning, and then I go out and I see the kids, because then I'm not, what have you done? Are you ready for school? Blah, blah. I'm actually fairly chilled out, and I'm like, okay, what are we having for breakfast? Where's the world going? How are we going for time? The only reason that I worked out that I had a very carefully constructed happy bubble was, when my mum first moved in with me. So we share a house now, and thankfully she doesn't do it anymore. But she used to start her day like with the world news at 5:30, 6 in the morning. And so the challenge for me with that is I would float out into the lounge room very and usually I'd put on some music that had the right cadence so everyone was quite calm, and she would start with Donald Trump this and the plague that and blah, 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 blah. And I'd be like, and I'd feel all this tension rising in my body. And I'm like, what is wrong with this picture? And in the end, I had to say to her, look, you can't talk to me about those things in the morning. And if I give you the hand, it's not that I don't love you and I don't want to engage with you and have a conversation. I just don't want to talk about all those things that are external to myself, my reality, and where I'm going today. But, you know, so I did that. I created that unconsciously. But what are the steps that someone can take perhaps to start engaging consciously in that mindfulness if it's a completely foreign concept to them and they have never heard it before?
That morning sounds amazing, by the way.
I do love it.
Oh my goodness, sauna in the morning, amazing. And a couple of things that you said there I think are really important, and you know, around the choice of what we're digesting. So, you know, that news and social media, you know, is having an impact on our mental health. And because it seems quite passive, you know, it's just kind of always there scrolling along in the background. Something that I've found really useful is first thing in the morning is not looking at my phone, because I've got emails on my phone, as most of us do. So I don't look at that for the first 30 minutes. Now that sounds really pretty lame, but it's actually, it was so difficult.
That's a long time.
For the first, and then I watched what was happening in my body when I did that. I was so stressed. I'm thinking, this is insane. Like, I'm so upset that I can't look at my emails on my phone.
For 30 minutes.
Thought, this is actually needs, you know, a reason why I shouldn't do it. So
I need to assume control over my domain now.
So I think, you know, things like that work for you in your own life. So that's something that I've been able to maintain. Every now and then I'll find it starts to creep back and I'll have to just go, oh, hang on. Back into the emails from bed again, you know. So just, you know, kind of checking in. Also, and it will be different for everyone, but relationships, you know, I think you have some relationships that really restore and revitalize your energies, and you learn and grow from those people, and then some that you don't so much, but we are stuck in these habits where we feel like we have to, or
maintain them.
It takes a lot of energy, and it's taking us out of ourselves and back up into our heads. So that's something else that I thought I did a bit of a spring clean. And also connecting with nature. I think if that's another thing that's happening for humans, we are becoming sick from not spending time in nature.
Well, and not being outdoors.
Like
I'm really lucky with the house that I rent at the moment. It's a little bit of a cross between an Australian house and almost like one of those Spanish. So like not in the architecture, which would be lovely, but it's got the indoor courtyard with all the big doors, so you open up, so the whole house gets fresh air, like pretty much every day, depending on how bad the weather is. But over and above that, it's so easy to stop the things that we know are good for us too. Like I used to go hiking at Morialta every single week, at least once or twice a week for 2 hours, you know, and just have the world disappear. But I worked out just about 3 months ago that I hadn't done that for a year. And I'm like, where did that year, why did I stop? And it was just everything else became more important. So all these noisy things that you're talking about, so like my phone, the businesses, what other people wanted from me, like that all became more important than what I needed to do to nurture myself, and it's really a trap.
Absolutely. It's habitual. You know, we're kind of always just jumping to please others, and I guess that's how I got into it in the first place, you know, being a people pleaser, as many women are, I'm going to say. That doesn't end well for me eventually, so
no, like
I had to kind of stop that.
Actually, it's kind of funny. I had a really good conversation with one of my other guests, Tracy Corsten, and we were talking about just the issues for women in general, not discounting the fact that there are issues for men. So I always like to be reasonably careful when I bring gender into play, but you know, the reality is that if you throw in, you know, you're a woman, you have children or don't have children, you're going to get loaded up with issues either way, let's be honest. And then you have businesses, you know, we get asked different questions, and there are different expectations in terms of how we balance all of those things. Like we really are expected to be the perfect wife or partner, you know, emotionally available there, emotionally available and fully present for our children and at all their school plays and everything else that could possibly be happening. But the school will communicate with you 24 hours beforehand, never mind that your diary is booked out 6 weeks in advance. You know, and then tick the boxes for all the business things, but then, you know, you're held to account and or criticised. You can't possibly have, you know, 3 successful businesses and 2 children that you keep happy and, you know, a healthy relationship. And so you actually start doubting yourself. So you go, oh, hang on a minute, can I not have those things? Should I stop now? Do you think that we're ever going to get to a point where women in particular will just be allowed to get on with being who they are and doing what they do without having all of these people throwing measuring sticks at us?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I think certainly for me, the biggest measuring stick was myself.
Yeah.
Certainly that's where the compassion, and that's sort of something I'm really interested in at the moment, is listening to the language I use for myself.
Yeah.
It's pretty rough. Like, I wouldn't use that language to a friend.
So
I'm starting to sort of watch that and go, well, hang on, you know.
Yeah.
It's not really necessary to talk to myself like that, and changing that.
Yeah.
You know, consciously changing that and bringing more compassion to myself and judgments on others.
Yeah.
You know, it's all very innate, and it's just kind of happening all the time. But it's nice to watch, and it's interesting to watch.
It is interesting to watch. I think too, I was actually talking to one of my other guests. I did an exercise many years ago in my 20s where I was like, I wasn't allowed to judge anyone or anything for 30 days. And I had to notice every time that I did and progressively pare back my judgment. It was one of the most painful exercises I've ever gone through in my life. But it was amazing because it changed how I interfaced with and saw the world. And it also changed, like, I ceased having an external measuring stick for who I was, because I'd kind of got to a point, the first 2 weeks I went, you really are a judgy cow. Like, this is not, you know, constant. I can't believe that you've just rolled your eyes at that person's wardrobe choice, or, you know, like, so it was fascinating. But, you know, towards the end of it, you get to this point where you cease seeing people's wardrobe choices, you cease seeing, you know, people's body composition or the colour of their hair, or what you start seeing is the person. And you start having conversations with people where you're really just meeting them where they're at. And it kind of changed my whole way of being in the world after that, because you just, you know, are free to start conversations and have relationships with people that aren't, oh, that person's much more successful than me, or that person's, you know, much prettier than me, or whatever it might be that you get saddled up with growing up.
Yeah.
Do you think we're ever going to get to that point? I would like to see it, being a parent, that we teach these kind of things in schools, because as much as our poor teachers are loaded up with, can you please parent our children these days, like, depending who you talk to. But I feel like if we could get to that point where kids learnt not to have this external view of the world, and they very much had this internalised view, it's going to take a generation or two, but we would literally get to a point where we had a much better environment for everybody.
Absolutely. And I think there has to be a shift, because of the rates of anxiety in kids at the moment is just nuts.
Yeah.
There needs to be a shift. And I don't think the way we educate kids has changed that much since, you know, I was at school, which was a long time ago. Really, it hasn't changed, and society has around them. So I think we're definitely going to have to try and somehow get mindfulness and self-compassion into children at a younger age, because we're seeing them get really stressed out.
Yeah, well, and I think too, if we can teach children that, they go home and teach their parents. This is the thing. Your kids come home and teach you all sorts of things. You know, I get held accountable for environmental stuff.
The recycling's big.
It's huge, it's huge, and it's good, because I had no idea. Once upon a time, my children have taught me all the things. But it's... They do. They question things. They'll question your use of language. They'll question why you say something the way that you do, or why you've judged somebody to be deficient or otherwise. And I know in my house, I'm very obsessive about language because I think it's really powerful. And so, simple things like, one of the kids will go, I'm so shit, or whatever, because they've just died on a computer game. And so I'll sit down and go, really, what is it about what's just happened that makes you a horrible person? Can you just explain to me, what's going on? And they're like, I died and I should have lived and whatever else. I'm like, okay, so just so I can be clear, so you're playing a computer game that's quite difficult and you've inadvertently died because someone else playing the game that you have no control over it or has shot you or whatever it is, like splattered you or something. And that makes you a bad person. How? And I end up getting the rolled eyes, like, for God's sake, okay, I'm not a bad person, obviously. And I'm like, maybe don't call yourself shit because it's not very nice to yourself. So I think those conversations need to keep happening. But, not everyone has a background in counselling. Not everyone has, done all of this reading and excavated themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, as parents in a society, we really do rely on the education system and the teachers to change that from the inside out.
I agree. Not everyone is that interested in looking at themselves and their behaviour. And, and it's really hard. And I think kids are doing that. It's already there. I'm certainly not throwing blame on parents. My daughter does the same thing.
Yeah.
She puts herself down or says she looks a certain way. Or oh my God, you're 8. Yeah.
Yes. It's fascinating when you see them and they've got that external lens. You're like, you're not meant to have that yet. I'm meant to have kept you safe from that. Yes. To a degree. So it's really a big challenge. I guess just to close out nicely, what would you say is a good first step for someone who's maybe listened to this podcast and gone, do you know what, this mindfulness thing sounds like it might help me navigate the world differently? Where do they start?
Yep. There's a couple of really good apps that people would know about. So Headspace is one, Smiling Mind is another. Yeah. They are both mindfulness-based apps. Okay. So they're not long seated meditations. They just give you a couple of short little exercises.
Yeah.
But essentially, all we're really doing is switching from our thinking back to our senses. So if you can sit and notice the sense of smell, sound, breath, the sensation of breath. Pick any one you like. Yeah. Just notice it.
That just moves you back in to your body.
Because when you're connecting with the senses, you're not thinking. Even if it's just for a second.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Absolutely. Well, Amanda, thanks very much for joining me on the Seriously Social podcast. If you're looking to connect with Amanda, you'll find all of her details in the caption above, and by all means reach out to her and have a chat. And thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
No worries.
Thank you for listening to the Seriously Social podcast. See our website for more details at www.socialmediaaok.com.au/podcast. Check the show notes for credits, music used in the program, and more details about our guests.